I'd first like to thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee for agreeing to have such an early hearing date. We appreciate that so much.
Conversion therapy is an inhumane practice that denies individuals of their core selves, their true identities. Conversion therapy is fundamentally an abusive practice and must be banned immediately.
I am proud to have co-sponsored this legislation. It's now up to the legislature, to this committee, to ensure that all Commonwealth children of this generation are never wrenched backwards into an ill-gotten and brutal so-called therapy that far too many in our nation have endured.
LGBTQ folks have known for a very long time that these so-called treatments are bogus. We laugh about them, we joke about them, we talk about praying away the gay, and have for a long time. Mental health professionals now agree that it's not medically valid. It's not a medically valid treatment. You've heard already that many of the psychological and psychiatric associations that people know and respect have opposed conversion therapy and consider it to be either a sham, at best ineffective, or tantamount oftentimes to emotional child abuse.
I'm supposed to have a right to help the people whatever they want to be helped. I think that's not right. I come and say, oh, I just can give you this advice to you because the advice, if I give to you, I'm going to lose my license.
Would you also agree that pure talk therapy, as they call it, for lack of a clinical term, is also, even though we think of it as speech, it's actually professional conduct? Is that fair to say as well?
That's right. It is.
The courts would say.
It is conduct, and that's what the appellate courts. Both appellate courts in our federal system that have ruled on conversion therapy laws have upheld these laws. Leave with you in terms of context of the development of the law is that given the number of trial court judges we have, it's not surprising that you could find one who might take a view that we think is unfounded.
Because conversion therapy is fraud, we have actually proven this in court, that conversion therapy is consumer fraud.
It is simply the truth that not every young person that feels he or she is transgender or gay actually is.
The preamble of the United States Constitution, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and prosperity. To establish justice. To abuse a child with conversion therapy is not justice.
I was exposed to gay porn real early, touched by boys in my neighborhood, and when my sexual desires emerged, they were only for males. I would fixate on one impressive male, wanting to just delete me and replace me with him. I had no identity of my own. By age 17, I was emotionally unstable and walked out of the Christian bookstore suicidal because there was not one resource there that offered me any help. Finally, I broke down and told my parents about my homosexuality, and they helped me find a therapist who helped me explore the changes that I personally wanted. And he kept me alive. I saw Dr. Schmidt weekly for 5 years, starting at age 17. And he helped me talk out my emotional pains. And I discovered over time that it was deep emotional wounds and pains that had not been addressed that were underlying my other issues. Over time, my insecurities, self-hatred, fear of males, and obsession over one male faded. You realize many people experience zero same-sex attraction or gender confusion until after they were sexually abused. It's not everyone, but it's common. And if H140 had been a law in 1989 blocking me from the therapy that I was asking for, I probably would have killed myself. I would not have been content with the government mandate for what I had to identify as. I wanted a wife and my own children, and I wanted friendship with other men, which was not available somehow for me, and not to treat them as objects. And despite years of homosexual identity and behavior, I did experience change in my sexual desires. I no longer experienced the desires that would be typical of a gay man. And bills like H140 would have stolen my rich life that I experienced with my wife and my 4 kids of my own away from me. And there are thousands of once gay people out there. And when California tried to take away our rights last year with AB 2943, which they later pulled, I testified, and it brought many other people out of the woodwork that are also once gay. And we put together a book for the legislators in California, which we'll hand one to each of you, committee members. But patients should have the...
I apologize. I'm sorry. We have to
Can
move on.
I say one sentence?
Well, okay.
Patients should have the right to clarify and pursue their own sexual identity. Thank you so much.
I came out my senior year of high school as a lesbian. My attractions to women began, I believe, in a legitimate way, from a desire to feel safe and loved and to be accepted. But these needs had become sexualized in order to find what I longed for. And during this process of self-discovery, I allowed myself to question this place of self-protection because I wanted every part of my heart to be alive. My counselor didn't promise she could make me straight or take away my desires. However, she did assist in me facing these traumas, which included direct questioning about my sexual preferences and orientation. This in turn resulted in dismantling the barricades I had created, and my drive to find sexual intimacy with women shifted. If passed, this bill would deny the right that I believe every individual deserves, minors included, to pursue relief from trauma and to gain perspectives that would better help them self-identify.
I struggled deeply with my same-sex attraction, not because I feared any rejection from my family, but because I did not want to be gay. These attractions were in direct conflict with my faith and my desire to marry a woman and have kids someday of my own. I wanted that family. It wasn't until I was 22 years old that I finally found counseling and support to help me with my sexual struggles. I wish that I had found that counseling when I began to struggle with my orientation as a 12-year-old. I can tell you honestly, it would have saved me a mountain of hurt and destructive behavior had I found that type of help earlier in my life. Passing HB 140 or SB 70 would essentially be discriminating against those that are legitimately wrestling and with their conflicting desires. It forces a conclusion on these individuals that there is only one outcome for their sexuality, and that just isn't true. It certainly wasn't true for me. Please do not discriminate against people like me. Please do not remove client autonomy from those with unwanted same-sex attraction or gender struggles. People should all have the right to choose their own path and not have those rights stripped away. And parents should not have to fear retribution from the state if they are wanting to find help that their children want in pursuing help with unwanted sexual desires.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm all done.
You're welcome to.
I'm all done.
Thank you very much.
But I'll admit, fast forward a couple of years, now having a seat at the table, with kids in the room that are hearing what you're saying, it's hard to be quiet. You're adults. This is America. You've made choices for yourself. I'm happy that you're married. You have 3 beautiful kids. You're an ordained minister. I have the same, an ordained minister with 3 beautiful kids. I'm also gay. I have a husband. But the thing I think that hurt me the most to hear was the continual association with sexual orientation of being gay and trauma as a youth, specifically being molested by a man in one's life. This stereotype has built and built and built so much that I think it's so important that we all confront it head on, because LGBT folks are not child molesters. We are not created because of the indecent choice of another person. Sexual assault is not something to talk about so freely and flippantly. And I take offense, to be honest, with the idea that people are gay because their genitals were touched at a point in their life that wasn't of their choosing. People are gay after going to Canada, and later in life they decide to be gay. People go to Disney World and 5 years later decide that they're gay. It has nothing to do with these events in their lives, and nothing in this bill would prevent therapists from exploring true trauma that has been experienced by people of all sexual orientations. Again, you're adults. This is America. You've made these choices. But I think it's so important for kids to not be forced by their parents or by anyone to make these choices before they're ready, and to go to a therapist, not with a foregone conclusion in mind, but as I believe the bill is written, and if it's not, please help me see where it's not there, but with therapists who are going to explore who they are with them and help them decide who they are and who they're becoming, not with a foregone conclusion that they have to be straight or have to be gay.
Yes, Mr. Lewis. It felt to me, I appreciate the sensitivity here. Like, I certainly know what it's like to be mocked, ridiculed, all of that. We love gay people. We love LGBTQ people. We're advocating that there should be rights for people to determine whatever path they'd like to take. What doesn't feel fair is to remove from the table the potential to move from gay back to straight if that's what the person would like to pursue. And it's a, in the nicest possible way, it felt like you were just saying to me that I shouldn't have a right to share my own story. I did not suggest what someone else should do. I'm trying to protect a people group that now is having rights taken away from them to get professional help. The church is not adequately equipped to help these people like us. We needed to be able to go to professional. I went to a clinical psychologist who helped me, and it changed my life.
As did I.
Madam Chair, I have one question. So you talked about credible and rigorous studies. As a public health person, I understand what you're describing there. To your knowledge, are there any credible and rigorous studies that report on the percentage of people who are transgender who decide to go back to the gender that they were assigned at birth?
I think the numbers are I don't know, I can't answer exactly, but the numbers are very low of kids who have been helped through, at whatever age, through to become the person that they feel that they are. Very, very few either regret it or go back the other way. I'm sorry, I don't have the actual number.
In all research, it's important to define exactly what we mean by that. So it's very normal for kids of many ages to have periods of questioning their gender or their sexuality. And some of those studies report very high numbers of people changing their minds because they may be reporting on periods of time where we would expect all kids to question gender and sexuality at periods of time.
We have a Pulse victim survivor with us today, and it breaks my heart. I don't know if this individual seeks therapy by a religious figure or a licensed professional, but chooses to be at these hearings against these bills, which only bans a licensed professional. The fact that Pulse victim survivors witnessed 50 people murdered, including the gunman himself, and the solution to overcoming that trauma is to no longer be a homosexual, is devastating to our entire community.
I, for one, was never abused, touched, or molested. I didn't choose what came my way, but I did get choose to how to respond to it. I went to go seek help in counseling at a young age, and we're part of a ministry called Fearless Identity that go around the nation and the world, and we allow people to know that change is possible if you want it. We're not putting a gun to no one's head and telling them, hey, you have to change. We're against electric therapy as well, so we are with you when it comes to that. I'm sorry that happened to a lot of people. I am, and we're with you in this fight to stop it. But at the same time, this will stop young children, middle school. We go to middle schools and high schools where there is people that want change, and we're not telling them they have to. They're saying, hey, I'm afraid that the LGBTQ and other people are going to attack me or also bully me because I want to seek change. And I think that's sad. I also heard someone talk about Pulse nightclub, and like I said, it was a tragic event, and we definitely don't want to use that as, you know what I mean, a platform of pity, if not to join together and to build the church community and give them gay awareness. And also that if that really hits you so hard, to come and say hi to us. We don't bite. We love you guys.
Like Lewis as well, I was not abused, nothing physical. Had the same-sex attraction. I did not want it ever since I was a child, youth, and I wish I was offered an opportunity to talk to someone about it. I didn't get that opportunity, and going forward, I had desired to want change in my life, but I never had that option. I took action on that after Pulse nightclub happened to me. I say it's all respect and love. I still have friends that are in the gay lifestyle. I'm still very, very close to the other survivors. It's a bond of brothers and sisters, something that we all went through. And we speak to each other, and they know what I'm doing, and they respect it because I share my love with them. I don't throw it down their throat. I tell them what I do, but I still tell them that I love them, that I don't hate them, that it's not homophobia. It's just a choice that I've decided for me, and I think a choice that we should give our kids and our youth. Thank you.
If you look at, again, Senate Bill 70, and I believe the wording is the same in House Bill 140, line 20 of Senate Bill 70 says, gender identity and sexual orientation, including but not limited to efforts to change behaviors or gender expressions. So that is not narrowly tailored. That means that, as some of the people here who have testified today, if they wanted to, if their vision, if their desire was to grow up and have a family, to get married, to have children, and for their children to have a mother and a father, which I think is an honorable vision for anyone to have. But if they suffered from same-sex desire that they did not want, they would prohibit them from fulfilling their family desire. They would not be able to seek help even to change their behaviors, or in the case of gender identity, expressions. No one is arguing that someone can necessarily change the sexual desires that a person has with therapy. But we're all accountable for the behavior. And if someone is seeking counseling for help in changing unwanted behaviors or expressions, it's unconscionable that we would try and ban that.
We have not seen these kinds of civil and criminal penalties attached to basic talk therapy, giving advice. And the reason why that hasn't been done is because it is unconstitutional. NIFLA v. Becerra did in fact say that this type of legislation ignores the constitutional rights of individuals to speak freely and punishes them if they do. This bill forces its one-size-fits-all viewpoint on youth and therapy providers alike, claiming change in one direction works for every youth at all times, at any age, and that is simply not true. The youth of Massachusetts have the right to choose who they want to be and who they don't want to be, and to discuss that choice with a professional. Factually, there are quite a few reputable longitudinal studies, the gold standard, that find therapy open to change, not aversive, not coercive. Basic talk therapy has measurable, helpful, and beneficial results. Nicolosi, Baird and Potts, 2000, Spitzer, 2003, Carton and Wade, 2010, Jones and Yarhouse, 2007, Santero, Whitehead, Ballesteros, 2018. There was another just released a few weeks ago. Democratic free governments like that of Massachusetts do not ban speech and take children away from their parents for speaking what has been factually true for many. Democracy does not compel therapy providers to untruthfully say there is change in only one direction. Democracy does not censor truth that gender is a fact of biology, not bigotry. The truth, many studies show life-transforming change and freedom from unwanted sexual attraction and gender dysphoria.
You know, this bill ultimately leaves a hurting person without someone to hear them, and it leaves them without someone to talk to. Laws banning certain professional speech have recently been chastised by the Supreme Court, condemning the same overreach, such as this bill here in Massachusetts is attempting to do. And it's plain why this bill violates every First Amendment constitutional test. This bill is not content neutral. It discriminates against specific viewpoints. It's overbroad. It's vague, not clearly defined, and it places a prior restraint on speech. All these, in essence, are just different ways of saying that it's government attempting to police a counseling session, deciding that it knows best on what should be said or shared there. And I think of my friend Walt Heyer, who testified before you last year. He's a counselor in this space. He was born male, and he says he began his transgender journey when he was just 4 years old. He underwent gender transition in his early 40s and lived as a woman for 8 years. He says he regrets that change, but that he needed someone to sit down with him, to talk to him, to hear him, to help him through his unwanted orientation. Walt says that now hundreds of people come to him for his advice on their unwanted sexual attractions. But this bill seeks to silence people like Walt, and it will not give an outlet for persons who are struggling in the very same way that he struggled.
My first question is to Attorney Curry. You said this is a content-based regulation. Is that quoting the NIFLA decision, or is that your own opinion?
As far as this regulation is concerned, I believe it is in fact quoting the NIFLA opinion.
Okay, so I have the NIFLA opinion here. I've read it. I didn't see that in there.
It cites the pickup case, which
the pickup
was,
case. Yes. Great.
Which
The pickup case is the case in California in the Ninth Circuit where the court upheld a conversion therapy ban. Correct?
That's correct. It seems to me that in this decision, the Supreme Court is calling out that decision and saying that professional speech is not a category of speech they recognize. And throughout the opinion, the Supreme Court seems to criticize that decision and other decisions like it.
So I think I would agree in the limited sense, and I think even Attorney Klein mentioned this, that professional speech, that Justice Thomas did talk about professional speech in terms of just professional speech that was called out, as you say, by Justice Thomas. However, the pickup decision was based on professional conduct, incidental speech. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Would you
agree
also
with
agree that the Supreme Court had a chance to take up that case and declined to take it up?
At the time, yes, I do agree. But
Okay.
it's the
Twice?
Well, the landscape of speech has changed since then. As far as what the Supreme Court has been saying, they have not taken up the case. But if they did, we have serious concerns as to whether they would uphold
But they had the
that
opportunity
decision.
to take up a case and they passed on it.
That's correct.
And so you're basing the entire sort of pivot here is because of the Niflet case. You're thinking, is that changing the landscape? Because the landscape was pretty clear before that. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, the landscape is clear that the government does not have the right to restrict speech in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, but every time this has come up, there's the King decision in Third Circuit, pickup case. Every time it's come up, the courts have ruled that it is a fair regulation of professional conduct under the police powers of government licensing.
The Ninth Circuit has. That's
And
true.
every
I don't
other
believe the Supreme
circuit.
Court. I'm not certain that the Supreme Court would make
Okay.
that same decision based upon their criticism, very specific criticism of the decision and the reasoning in the pickup case.
I understand.
and
I'm
another.
sorry. I'm maybe sounding argumentative here, but when you made that claim, it kind of set me off because I think that's your opinion, and you're representing that as the court's opinion, which I don't believe is the case.
Well, if I may, this legislation defines sexual orientation to include homosexuality, heterosexuality, and there's another word in there, gender identity. But for example, this legislation doesn't apply to all sexual orientations. That right there is a content-based distinction.
This bill is very similar to the law in California. Would you agree that has been upheld?
Yes, I agree
Okay,
with that.
thank you.
Yes.
To place things in context and perspective, I'm actually from Liberty Counsel, the firm that represented David Pickup in that Ninth Circuit case.
I've seen that, yes.
And we've returned and asked for a motion to recommit to change the
I had that
mandate.
too, February 11th, yes.
Right. Both. February 11th is a very recent date, and it does represent, using the language that Thomas has provided in the Niflet case, that it does open a new door to revisiting these decisions based on content-based content-based and viewpoint discrimination. So the door is wide open. Currently, we are litigating in Tampa as we speak today, where a magistrate has given us favorable rulings to continue promulgating this litigation. Absolutely.
Okay, and then the next week in Florida, another judge upheld the ban.
Which continues to demonstrate, as Attorney Curry was mentioning, the changing jurisprudence in the nation when it comes to this specific speech. One thing that does remain clear is that government has no place between a client and their therapist. It's not a place for government to insert themselves. But the Supreme Court and other courts across the nation are well within their rights to change legal jurisprudence. We've seen that Plessy v. Ferguson changed legal jurisprudence, Brown v. Board of Education. There are times when a court comes out with a decision, specifically language addressing a certain area of the law, that reopens an issue. And we're seeing that in the Ninth Circuit. We're seeing that also in the King case in New Jersey.
I'm just going to let that lie.
Excuse me.
To specifically quote Justice Thomas in the Niflet decision, addressing what he said is the flawed logic of the pickup decision in the Ninth Circuit and the King decision out of New Jersey, says speech is not unprotected merely because it is uttered by professionals. Doctors help patients make deeply personal decisions, and their candor is crucial. When the government polices the content of professional speech, it can fail to, quote, preserve an uninhibited marketplace of ideas in which truth will ultimately prevail. So, we believe there is ample hope that the Supreme Court, if this law is unfortunately passed, that it will end up in those federal court decisions and be overturned because it is overbroad and it impinges on the rights of families and therapists and clients to get the counseling they choose. And I just want to add, because this hasn't been mentioned yet, Senate Bill 70 is by far the most aggressive form of this legislation we've seen to date in our country. It labels talk therapy statutorily as child abuse and would require all mandatory child welfare reporters to notify the state of any mental health professional who uses this type of therapy, including those therapists who have a simple conversation about same-sex attraction or gender identity with their client. Parents and therapists simply attempting, for example, to help gender-confused children avoid hormone injections and feel comfortable in their own skin would become the subject of a Department of Children and Families child abuse investigation, which could result in the loss of custody because it adds sexual orientation change efforts to the list of statutory child abuse categories under Section 51A, which is where you get the 51A reports, which is how Justina Pelletier, if you remember her, was stolen from her family for over a year because of a dispute over medical treatment. And I can't imagine that this body would want to repeat that tragedy on any number of youth who are simply trying to find their truth for how they live out their lives.
Okay, just a quick.
Really fast, I promise. Massachusetts Family Institute is associated with Focus on the Family, correct?
Focus on the Family, Alliance Defending Freedom, and the Family Research Council. That's right.
Focus on the Family and Massachusetts Family Institute oppose same-sex marriage?
We do.
And oppose same-sex adoption?
We believe every child deserves a mother and a father, and that marriage is between one man and one woman.
So over the course of the last several hours, we have heard from opponents to the ban that you want kids and adults to be able to make these decisions and that you would support them in their right to make that decision. But I think, is it not important for us to know that the opponents of the ban, yourselves, oppose the option of marriage for LGBTQ individuals and oppose adoption for these same individuals?
Well, what we're seeing with the current status of the law on those issues is the new victims being people who are trying to live out their lives, like the cake baker in Colorado who almost lost his business because he was trying to live out his conscience. And I can't imagine you would want someone to violate their conscience on these issues, would you?
I need to stop.
Okay, running out of time. I'd like to call, so we have a number of people who are still opponents to the legislation. Okay, why don't you all come up together, those of you? I'm going to give you each just 1 minute because we just don't have a lot of time. We have another bill to discuss as well.
I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker here in Massachusetts. My adult life has been dedicated to helping people, and I am pro-human being. I am not anti-anything. But this idea of conversion or coercive therapy, in my 20 years of being in this state, I have never known anyone to do these things to children. And I agree with you that if there is child abuse going on, my gosh, I am the first one to say, throw these people in jail and throw away the key. I am not advocating for child abuse, and I don't think that there's anybody in this room that is pro-child abuse. So we hear people stand up here passionately.
And so, one thing that I really appreciate by the more progressive side is that they really emphasize listening to everyone's stories. And what I ask is that we all here today also recognize that there are stories of people that have changed or have said to experience change in their sexual orientation and gender identity, and they found that to be healing to them, and I do not think we can reject their stories. And the one last thing I'll say is that my wife and I are DCF foster parents, and we deal with youth that have experienced abuse and trauma in so many just heinous and grievous ways, and I do not think that change efforts necessarily constitute examples of abuse in line with human trafficking and exploitation and sexual and physical abuse.
I don't sit before you as a straight person. I am still same-sex attracted, though I am married to a man. I am here today because I am looking back 28 years on my 15-year-old self and wondering how my life might have been different if I were offered a different answer, perhaps one that wasn't so black and white. Did I really have to act on my same-sex attraction in order to be happy? Did I really have to act on feelings just because I had them? Or could I have benefited from someone sitting with me with a willingness to listen to my story and walk with me through the healing process, wherever that might lead?
In the last session, a handful of your colleagues voted against a ban. And we want to offer this caution to those considering the same vote. If you vote to retain this barbaric practice, you will send a message to LGBTQ youth in your district and across the Commonwealth. the message you would send is that their representative in the general court will not stand up and fight to protect them from physical and mental abuse.
The part I struggle with this 140 is talk therapy aspect of it. Not because of anything, just because of I think sometimes we are losing sight of the abusive aspects, which I'm supporting either one. I have a co-sponsored bill on this also. So the part that struggles with, if talk therapy was exempt from this bill, would more organizations like yourself be supporting it? Just from a professional standpoint, I'm asking because I'm trying to educate myself. I don't pretend to be a lawyer, and nor will I ever. So I don't want to get into the First Amendment piece of it. I just want to talk about it as a human being, as a person.
Yeah, I guess I would say as a human being, the purpose of this ban is to make sure that we are not harming youth, that we're not harming minors in a therapeutic environment, that you don't have therapists who are licensed going into sessions and telling kids that they're not gay and forcing them in a direction that would be harmful to them. We want people to have the opportunity to express how they're feeling, to walk through all of the variety of feelings. There's nothing in this bill that bans that sort of discussion or discourse. And I heard that come up, and it's frustrating to hear that, because we would never support a bill that would ban that sort of talking or that sort of discourse or that sort of walking through all the stages of people's emotions and their experience. I don't know if that directly answers your question, but from our standpoint, NASW is the largest professional association of social workers in the world and would not come out in support of this position or this ban if it would in any way limit that ability to have that talk therapy.